Flyers tonight have the night off after I would say, an inexcusable effort last night. And after all the good vibes, Dave Isaac, they have all seemed to be long ago. You're around this team every day. Do you get that sense that that 10-game winning streak seems like it was not only in 2016, but maybe in a different season?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you playing that song right there, summer may be here before you know it. This team's certainly not looking like a playoff team the way things are going. They have the last wild card spot right now, but they're kind of clinging to it for dear life. And, you know, this team has lost 9 of its last 11 since that 10-game winning streak. They've given it all back. I mean, they're now tipping the scales in the other direction, and it's how you can look at a team in a negative light after a streak it seems dumbfounding, but that's kind of where we are right now with this team. The inconsistency has been rampant. It's been that way since the start of the year, and that's what they're trying to figure out here. I don't know what's going to do it. I mean, nobody is saying that they're complacent in losing games, even though they feel like they have a good effort. But that's where it sure feels like it's heading right now.
Yeah, and let's be clear too. That 10-game winning streak, you said they're giving it all back. They didn't make up a lot of ground. Sure, they got some ground back, but a 10-game winning streak, they didn't go from like the bottom of the pack all the way to the top. That brought them really stabilized them into the middle.
Yeah, the problem with that win streak was that everybody else in the division was doing it at the same time. I think Columbus might have started theirs like 2 days after the Flyers started theirs, but Columbus has just ended last Thursday. So they made up a whole boatload of ground, and when they did go from the bottom to the very top of the NHL, and other teams were streaking too. Pittsburgh was streaking. The Rangers were streaking. Washington is a very good team as well. So the Flyers aren't part of that conversation anymore. There's a big gap. They have the second wild card spot. There's, I think, an 8-point gap between the first wild card and the second wild card right now. And if the Flyers aren't careful, they're going to be without that second wild card spot as soon as, I think, tomorrow. It could go away.
Dave, you've been a part of the show for a while, and we always talk goaltenders. But what is the latest on the Mason-Neuvert duo?
Well, it seems as though Michael Neuvert just kind of recovered it at a poor time. Even though he was pretty good last Saturday in a win that snapped a 5-game losing streak against the Tampa Bay Lightning, I think that Dave Hakstol sees this as kind of a time where he needs to be able to rely on one guy, or at least whoever's in there on any given night, and he thinks that Neuvert still needs to build a stronger resume, I guess, since his latest injury. And injuries have been the story of his career, but I think that he sees Steve Mason right now as the guy that he can trust. I'm sure he'll be between the pipes tomorrow against the Vancouver Canucks, and it's not to say that Neuvert will play again for the rest of the season, but it'll be pretty clearly defined as a backup role from here on out, it looks like.
Let me get your opinion. Would you have liked to see Stolarz get more of an opportunity when they had that elongated time when he was up here?
Yeah, I think there were times when he could have gotten starts and did. The one that points out to me the most was the game against New Jersey where Mason ended up getting minorly hurt. That was right before Christmas. It was a game right before Christmas. And, I mean, selfishly from a journalistic standpoint, a storytelling standpoint, that would have been a great time to play Anthony Stolarz because he had the storyline of the first New Jersey-born goaltender playing against the Jersey Devils who he grew up watching. So from that standpoint, I was hoping for a good story. But it sure seemed to make a whole lot of sense based on how much the Flyers are relying on Steve Mason. And Stolarz ends up playing the last 2 periods of that game out of necessity because Mason got hurt. But I think there were other opportunities there as well where you could have put him in there. And I understand that he doesn't have a deep resume, that these 4 games that he played in this most recent call-up are the only 4 games he's got in his NHL career, but he played well enough to where you'd say, okay, he probably deserves another go at it. I mean, how many times do you see a guy pitch a shutout as Stolarz did and then not play the next game? And, you know, with the situation the Flyers were in, you kind of said, okay, well, maybe that's so ridiculous. But then you don't see him again for like a week and a half or whatever it was. Yeah, it was a little bit of a head scratcher to me.
He was 2-0, 938 goals, a save percentage with a 1.79. Those numbers are by far, in a very small sample size, but they are by far better than the other two guys. And I think when you look at this streak, this losing skid, it's not a complete losing streak, but this lack of wins over the last since the 17th when they lost, Dave, I'm not saying it's the goaltending, but it just seems, again, like when you don't have nights when you score, their goaltenders are just good. They're not great, and you're hoping for them to get hot. And sure, they can get hot, but they're not hot because they're great. They're hot because they're hot, and it seems it's the same story with this team. Again, it's going to bite them.
Yeah, when things are going that way, you need a goalie that can steal you games. And Steve Mason or Michael Neuburg hasn't stolen them many games. I'd be hard-pressed to even think of one off the top of my head. And you need that. And you need that to be a playoff team because this league is so good anymore that you have a team like the Flyers go on that 10-game win streak, and it wasn't even good enough to propel them into first place. So I think you need that kind of goaltending, and the Flyers don't have it right now. They're hoping that Steve Mason's confidence continues to go up as he knows now that he's kind of the guy. But going forward into next season and the one after that, that's going to be an issue. I mean, sooner or later they'll have one of their many goalie prospects between the pipes. I don't know when that'll be. I don't think it'll be next year. Maybe Stolarz is a backup, but that's something that they're gonna need from a goalie somewhere down the line because this team has proven that it's not good enough to win games having a goaltender steal it for them. And they're also not good enough to win because their offense is just going to provide it every night. I mean, they were top 3 in the league early in the season, but they've averaged less than 2 goals a game since that winning streak has ended. So there are plenty of reasons why the Flyers just aren't good enough right now.
No doubt about it. Dave Isaac's with us from the Courier Post. You can also read his stuff at 973ESPN.com, at Dave G. Isaac at practice today. Hakstol seems like he's been changing things up. Were there more changes today?
There were, but it was kind of a strange situation. It looked like they were trying to, at least this is what Hakstol said, he was more evaluating on defense than he was looking at how lines worked offensively. I would still be surprised if we didn't see Travis Konecny on the right wing, the top line tomorrow against the Vancouver Canucks. I think that's a change that's probably coming, and he did keep the lines the same for the last 3 games, but man, he's tried to spark this team with line change after line change, and none of them seem to be working.
Yeah, and Konecny's a guy who's kind of been in the doghouse, it seems like, kind of up and down. Another guy who last year gave this team such a jolt, and I don't feel like we've heard nearly as much about, is Gostisbehere. How would you evaluate his season?
I think he's in a little bit of a sophomore slump. I mean, he's been pretty snake-bitten the past, I don't know, half dozen games or so. He's been getting shots on net, and they just haven't been finding their way to the back of the net. But there were certainly times, kind of like Konecny, I thought that the one-game benching was ill-timed. I think that it was probably a week or so before Shane Gostisbehere got healthy scratched that one game where his defense was kind of way off from where it needs to be. But he's starting to get back there. It's just that the points aren't there for him. In terms of shot attempts at the net, it's there. It's just not going in for him, and he's not alone.
Best player on the team this year has been?
Their all-star, Wayne Simmonds, no question. I mean, Jake Voracek's been good at times, but Wayne Simmonds has just done everything for them. I mean, the Flyers made a couple signings in the offseason, and it looked pretty clear that it was in hopes of taking Claude Giroux off of the penalty kill. And the Flyers did that just by putting Wayne Simmonds on the penalty kill, and it took him a little while to get there, but that's how he started his career, and he's been fantastic at it since then. So he's got a shorthanded goal this year. He's been killing penalties very well. He's on the power play. He's tied for second in the league over the last 3 years in terms of power play goals. He's been doing it all for him.
He'll be at the All-Star Game back in L.A. where he started his career. Dave Isaac, the Flyers take on the Canucks tomorrow night. You can hear the game right here on 97.3 ESPN at Dave G. Isaac. I'll ask you this in closing. trade deadline a little bit down the road, but Hexier seemed like he's commented on a little bit. They haven't been really apt to do something in the Hakstol era. Do you think that changes if they're continuing to play like they've been playing over the last 2-3 weeks?
Well, as he said today, he's not going to get off track from the plan. The plan is to let the young kids develop and not trade them before they have and get into another scenario like the Flyers were in with Patrick Sharp and Justin Williams so many years ago. They don't want guys to come back and haunt them. They want to let them play out and not trade them for Adam Oates, who's on the not even on the back nine. He's on the 18th hole and putting out. I mean, they're not going to trade for a rental and have a young guy do it. But if they trade and get a young piece in here, obviously it'll cost them a young piece. But I don't think that's out of the question. Whether that happens closer to the deadline or closer to now, I don't know. I mean, there's only two teams in the whole league that are really definitely out of it. The Colorado Avalanche are one of them. That's who the Flyers have been speculated to be interested in, a guy like Matt Duchene who could play left wing and play center. I think that's probably the best bet, but the price is very high in Colorado and a little too rich for Ron Hextall's blood. And you know what? If this season's going to end up being a dud, even if there's still a whole half of the season to go, but if he thinks that's the case now, I don't think there's any reason to pull a trigger on a trade where that the price is going to be high if it's not going to get you to the playoffs.
All right, Dave Isaac, all over the Flyers, of course, and if they'll be back on tomorrow night against the Vancouver Canucks here on 97.3 ESPN. You the man, Dave. Good to talk to you, pal.
All right, thanks for having me.